Hey there, welcome back to the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. What the heck is going on with the child killers? We had the school shooting in Georgia, and it got a lot of attention, rightfully so. 4 people dead, I believe 9 others injured. And then I also saw another story, didn't get nearly as much press, but shocking. An 11-year-old kid killed 2 people. What the heck's going on? I mean, I don't have any answers for us. So let's ask my next guest, Dr. Vince Callahan. He's a mental health expert. Is this more prevalent than it was in previous generations, or do we just see it more because of social media?
We're seeing it more, and what we're not looking at is the global picture of abuse. It's not just about being bullied. These kids have been severely abused in some form or manner, and somehow they become volcanoes with that rage and that vengeance, and they get stuck in the fight mode, and at the right opportunity and the right things that happen, they launch out and do this. So
I mean, are all of them abused? Isn't there like a certain small percentage of the population that's just like American psycho and they're psychopaths and born to do this kind of stuff anyway?
Yeah, there is, but it's like less than 1%. And I'm going to say, because I've been researching this the last few days, I'm going to say that most of these shooters have either A, some form of mental illness, or B, or combination, there is some kind of, there's usually severe abuse, whether it's physical, sexual abuse, abandonment, things at that level cause this. And they just act out. We have a fatherless society, and we've got kids that are just doing whatever the heck they want to do, and they're doing it violently.
Right, and that's one of the things that shocked us about the guy who shot Trump is how young he was. And I know he was 20, but he still looked like a kid, and what little we know about him, he kind of had that same sort of crazy Children of the Corn air about him.
Yeah, he did. Sure did. And you get that even with the one, I believe it was the Covenant School in Nashville, that shooter. That shooter didn't look the age that they were. And I, as a counselor and as a therapist, I believe people get stuck at an emotional age when that trauma happens that's unresolved. And so they act out at that age. And so if it happened at 6 years old or 10 or 12, you may have a 24-year-old that thinks like a 12-year-old, and they're going to act out.
So how much of a connection is this between people who are raised in a home with their biological parents, mom and dad, versus those who have a stepdad or a mom's boyfriend or maybe just a single mom? Because I see a lot of books and dives into the statistics that make a pretty strong connection about that, but I don't hear a lot reported on it, Vince.
Yeah, they don't report on it, but the truth is children who are raised in a 2-parent home and there's attachment and connection and communication, and we actually do the family thing, you don't have those guys coming out as shooters, and you don't have them coming out dealing with all the stuff, and you don't have the mental illness. You've got confidence and self-esteem. But when you get the stepdads involved, and not every stepdad is bad, but some of them are, you get single parent, it begins to really screw up the development of the child.
Right, and we should go even further and say, of course, most stepdads are fantastic, but the rate of trauma, abuse, and bad things happening to the kids is exponentially higher under a stepdad scenario than a biological dad scenario. Is that what we're kind of fleshing out?
Absolutely, 100%.
How do we get less of this, Vince?
We've got to pay attention. We've got to realize, especially in young kids and teenagers, young teens, when you get into the isolation, when they start pulling away, we've got to do something. We've got to start saying, wait, what's happening here? What's happening? Because one thing that all of these shooters have in common, they tell people in some form or way what they're about to do. And they tell it sometimes months, even like the report came out that the kid in Georgia last year was being investigated for a possible going to shoot up a school. So we've got to pay attention when these kids get isolated and they get focused on gore and get hyper-focused with guns and ammo and all that kind of stuff. We've really got to just do a better job as adults paying attention to what we're seeing in our kids.
Where can they find your work outside of the James Show, Vince?
drvincecallahan.com. I'm there to help families, and you can reach me there on that. And actually, I have a free download called the Family Handbook. and it's totally free. And it helps families talk about things all over the system. So drvincecallahan.com.
Dr. Vince Callahan, thank you for being on the James Show. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
That's not a fun topic, but it kind of freaks me out because, like, on the same day, I'm looking at these headlines. 14-year-old kills 4 people and an 11-year-old commits a double murder. I look at my kids, and right now, actually, it's Quinn's birthday. So happy birthday to my youngest. She just turned 9. And then they're, 11, 12, 14. So these kids are the same age as my kids? They're running around killing people, not just like a one-off, not like, oops, the gun went off and I hit the neighbor in the stomach. No, 4 people dead in Georgia with another 9 injured. An 11-year-old commits double murder. What is going on with kids? Have we lost it? What should we do? Two questions for you. Number 1, where's this coming from? What's the problem? Number 2, what's the solution? How do we fix this? 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. I'm James Parker. This is The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Dan Bongino. Welcome to The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. I know your heart's broken from the stories yesterday. Guarantee you heard of the school shooting in Georgia. Of course, that fits the narrative, and it's going to be harped on. So 4 dead, I believe 9 injured total. The other one that didn't make nearly as much news, but I found this absolutely bone chilling, was an 11-year-old killed 2 people in Louisiana. I believe it was like stepdad and stepdad's mom, or like a grandmother or a step grandmother or something. So I mean, this is the stuff of Stephen King. What's going on? Is there something we can do to minimize this? I realize we live in a world where there's a certain percentage of people that are just going to be born as psychopaths, and it just seems like this. It's more than it used to be. What do you think? 800-288-9227, because the questions easily become, what's causing this and how to fix it? Daniel in Dallas, you're on WBAP. What do you think we should do?
Well, the government and the system itself has taken the power away from the parents. I mean, I'm originally from Mississippi, and I know a friend of mine that had to go to court because she physically disciplined her 13-year-old, and they stated anybody from 13 up, once they reach the year of teenage, cannot be physically disciplined. When you take that power away, yes, sir, when they take that kind of power away from the parents, not only the parents, but the teachers don't even paddle the kids in school anymore when they act up. They want to give them a pat on the rear end and sit them on their way and give them a little kind talking to, because they're scared of hurting their feelings and getting their job in jeopardy.
Right. Well, I'm glad you bring it up, because I like to put that in the larger context, because we talk a lot on this show, especially in the last year or so, about how many times the government comes between the child and the parent when they want to chop off their junk or take hormone blockers or use a different pronoun or put on lipstick or whatever. And then we had, I don't know if you heard this a couple weeks ago, I was going through an Austrian refugee, an Austrian immigrant. She had grown up when the Nazis took over in Austria, and was talking about all the changes they made in society and how many of them sound like what we're doing today. And one of them was they constantly got between the kids and their parents. And that was...
We were being told not to listen to our parents. They were just old-fashioned old fogies. They did not understand the young people. Only Hitler did. So don't listen to your parents anymore. And besides, you had freedom and you had rights. So our parents could not tell us anymore when to come home at night. We could decide that for ourselves.
That's what you just described, Daniel.
Yep, I sure did.
Well,
people need to wake up. It's just going to get worse if we don't take a stand.
Well, that's a fantastic call. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. There is something disturbing, and we're not having the real conversation about it. And the other example that was brought up by my previous guest, Dr. Vince Callahan, the Nashville shooter fits this concern perfectly. Did you read some of the crazy stuff that was finally released from that? That was something, I think that just came out in the last week or so. She was upset about being born in the wrong body. Her hatred, her confusion, her anger had been directed and sharpened at Christianity in general. And we were constantly told, oh, Trump's full of hate speech. He made the bloodbath comments. He's inciting anger. He did January 6th. And then when we actually have real incitement to real violence, no one wants to get to the bottom of that mystery. Marianne in Frisco, you're next up on WBAP. What do you think's going on?
Well, I'm a 70-some-year-old grandmother, and I'm seeing that I don't necessarily think this is a gun issue, and everybody's screaming about it's the guns. When I was raising my children, there were guns in society, but you never saw anything like what's going on out there right now. But one of the things that I see going on with my grandchildren is they are on these screens. The ones I'm thinking of right now have these Switch gaming systems, and they are playing these games that all they see on these games is shooting each other, shooting targets, and shooting, the bad guy. And they're on these games. It's called Fortnite is one of them. Roblox is another one, and they are starting. These kids are on there when they're 3 and 4 and 5 years old, and they don't. I don't think they know the difference between what's real and what's fantasy.
Well, look. First off, I'm quite familiar with Fortnite. I was on it last night, doing quite well this season. So your kids are probably playing against me at some point. But no, the like Dr. Vince Callahan in the previous segment, there have been studies into the video games, and you'll probably believe this, Marianne. The kids that play video games, even if they play them a lot, even if they play really violent video games with blood and gore and disgusting stuff, if they have their biological mother and father raising them in the home together in stability, they don't have the problems dissociating video games from real life, So maybe video games aren't helping the people who are already predisposed to this. It may be sort of acting as an accelerant to the psycho kids, but it's not the base disease. It's just the symptom of something else.
Well, I understand that, and but I've been thinking a lot about this because, like I told you, we had guns when my kids were growing up. But and guns is not the problem.
It's definitely not guns. Marianne, right. When I was growing up, I hate to try and out old you here, but back when I was a kid, when my dad was dropping me off at elementary school, we had a gun rack in the back of the truck with guns in it, just dropping me off in the carpool lane. And you know what? There were a bunch of other dads that did too, just had guns floating around. It was never a big deal.
It's the fact that these kids are not being parented, and Dr. Callahan, he's right on when he talks about the
right. And I'm sorry we're running out of time here. As I like to say, they don't need gun control. They don't need free lunch. They don't need guidance counselors. They don't need hormone blockers. Can we try dads? Can we try that? Just in the mix. Fall in love, get married, have kids, stay together. Can we try a family first? 800-288-9227, 800-288-9227. 61 days until the election. It's The James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Welcome to The James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. What's going on with kids these days? We had kid killers throughout history. The question is it happening more frequently, or are we just hearing about all of them because of social media and whatnot? You think back to the Lizzie Bordens of history. Kid killers are not new. It's just, if there's a rash of them, what's going on? What can we do about it? How can we recognize it? Let's ask someone who looks at people's brains for a living. Lee Richardson's back on The James Show. Welcome back here. And the two big stories that are on our minds today is, of course, in Georgia, 4 people dead in a school shooting, 9 others injured. But also in Louisiana, a story that didn't get as much attention. There was an 11-year-old who committed a double murder against 2 adults. What is the deal with evil children going on killing sprees, Lee?
Well, it's an interesting thought to think that an 11-year-old would have access to a method and a means to kill 2 adults. And of course, then where is that 11-year-old mentally? But I think that what is going on is kids today, they're much more stressed out. They do not have the psychological safety that I had as a kid growing up. And I think when you don't feel safe, then you get defensive and you strike out.
Let's talk about that psychological safety, because the world that these kids are growing up in is definitely more safe than the world that we grew up in. And God forbid our parents and grandparents, they had to deal with things like, polio and scarlet fever and, wild animal attacks and whatnot. The world seems to be safer than ever. How are we coming away with the opposite level of anxiety?
Well, there's a lot more to that psychological safety, I think. In many ways, the world is not safer. If you look at social media and how that's used, that has created some impact on mental health, and that there's plenty of studies that support that. And you think about it, when you and I were a kid, if somebody had something snide to say to us, they'd catch us in the hall at school and they would say it. Maybe one other person heard it. Now, if somebody has something snide to say to someone else, they'll get on social media and they'll blast it, and probably 100 people will hear it. So the impact is much, much greater. And I think that we live in times that I think technology has a ton of good, but I also think it has a ton of bad. And I think we've trained those young minds that they need gratification instantly. And if you want something, you put it on social media, or they don't pick up the phone and call anybody. They text. And we're training that brain to short circuit, and looking for the shortcut, and that is not brain health.
Okay, so the other thing that bothers me about these stories is I believe in both of them, the parents seem to be somewhat responsible, or attempting to be responsible. The parents had contacted authorities, I believe it was almost a year ago, because he had made a Facebook post or some sort of mention that he wanted to shoot up a school. So the authorities even come in and check on it, but they can't really do anything if he hasn't done anything. So, I mean, just alerting the authorities, that hasn't been enough.
Well, it's my understanding, and you're more in the news than I am, but it was my understanding that the parents did not alert the 14-year-old in Georgia, that they actually, the FBI picked up on his postings online and went to the house and met with the father and met with the son and recognized that there were guns and weapons in the house, but the father said he does not have unsupervised access to them. And you're right. The police, the FBI, they did what they needed to do because there wasn't a next step. They checked it out, and there was no reason for immediate action to be taken. But, that's a red flag. And I think when we see a red flag, we need to have a next step. And the next step would be a neuropsychological assessment. And through that, perhaps, I feel pretty confident that there would have been some information gathered from that might have been useful in the future, turned over to the school that the child was attending. So I think that, but you're right, in some cases parents do recognize it, but they don't know what to do with it. And we really don't have the policies in place. We don't have the procedures. We're just now waking up and realizing, we got some real issues with mental health. 1 out of 4 young people suffers from depression or anxiety. And suicide is the second leading cause of death for young people. So we're just now waking up and we're realizing that we've got to put some policy in place. And this is what Dr. Murthy talked about in his advisory that he put out on mental health. And he talked about how stressed out parents are, and they are. Oh my gosh, most stressful job I've ever done. But he was saying more than that. And he was saying that we've got to really look at how we prioritize and how we value mental health. And when it's hitting an 11-year-old that has access to a weapon that can go kill 2 adults, or even a 14-year-old that goes and kills 4 people and injures 9 more, we have a problem.
Lee Richardson, thanks for being on The James Show. How do they find you outside of WBAP?
The good old-fashioned website, thebrainperformancecenter.com, or on LinkedIn.
Thank you very much, Lee Richardson. Your response to what we just talked about, 800-288-9227. What is the deal with these crazy kids, and what can we do to minimize the kind of tragedies we saw? Because it's not just the kid in Georgia, the kid in Louisiana. The same discussion we just had applies in many ways to the guy who shot the 3 Dallas police officers last week. Something we got to deal with. 800-288-9227. In 5 minutes, you'll find out who President Vladimir Putin endorsed for the election. It's the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey there, welcome to the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. After I talk to George in Farmersville, you're going to find out who Vladimir Putin endorsed. I have it in the native Russian as well. But first, let's talk to George in Farmersville. You're on WBAP. What do you think, sir?
I think a lot of the violence nowadays has to do with video games. I mean, every video game that's out is something about getting a gun and shooting somebody and killing them, and they don't think nothing about it. When they get killed in the game, they just come right back to life and start over again. And I think some of them have a misconception of what a gun will really do to real human beings in life.
I take the exact opposite tact on that. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I like the fact that most video games are gun-centric because you realize we're programming like a whole generation of dudes that guns are cool and different guns are cool. And this is a regular semi-automatic handgun, and this is a revolver, and this is a semi-automatic assault rifle. This is a shotgun. You know, I think... culturally speaking, Hollywood has to be ripping its hair out that all of these movies and all these video games and so much of the music industry as well glorifies guns, because that's culturally not what they stand for. But I'll be damned if they're almost helping us out with that. Also, the counterbalance to that is all the games are violence or gun related. No, the biggest video game is probably Minecraft, and it doesn't have a gun or anything gun related into it. But your point still stands that most of the overwhelming majority of the popular video games are gun-centric. And I would push back on that because the determining factor, or one of the statistics that you could look at and decide, well, is this guy more likely to commit murder or gun violence or not, isn't whether or not they play video games. It's whether or not they have a dad in their in the house. And, you know, the connection between that statistic is far more noticeable than the connection between people who play violent video games and not. The guy who shot the cops last week, you know, he was, I don't know, 30, 40. He looked like very much a grown man, probably not in the video game arena at all. And so how do you explain this guy? You know, he got caught up in some sort of weird Moorish temple Islam cult thing that seems to be his main influence. And no, I don't think video games are an overall negative and inspire violence.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, hey, good talk. George in Farmersville. If you ever want to call the show, 800-288-9227. You can call. You can text. Sometimes we see that. I've been getting more emails now that I mentioned I have the email address james@wbap.com because that's super easy to remember. But the number one way that you reach out and say hi to me, Facebook instant message. Still, for every message I get on an Instagram or on a Twitter/X or an email, I get 10 on Facebook, and that's fine. That's not a complaint. All right, let's get the breaking news on President Vladimir Putin's endorsement for the 2024 election.
Был действующий президент, господин Байден. Вот он, его сняли с гонки, но он рекомендовал всем своим сторонникам поддержать госпожу Харрис. Вот и мы тоже так сделаем, будем ее поддерживать.
All right, hang on, let me pause it right here. Trina, what did he say so far? You know Russian, right? Who did he just... No, you didn't? Trina doesn't know? Garrett, did you translate that? How's your Russian? Is it a little rusty? Is it... You don't know... Can you speak Russian? All right. Well, according to the subtitles there, he said, ideally... I'm not kidding. According to the subtitles, he said, ideally, I would like Joe Biden. In fact, go back. You can hear him say Biden a little bit at the middle. Listen, I'm beginning.
Действующий президент, господин Байден.
See where he said Biden? Yeah, he said he would like Biden to be president again, but since he can't have his ideal candidate, Kamala Harris is far preferable to Trump. And he goes on to say, because President Trump, man, he had all these rules. He was pressing down on us with sanctions, and it was a real pain in the butt. And then my mind started wondering, because I've always thought Russian sounds like you spoke English and then you flip the tape over and now you're listening to English backwards. I don't know if you backmatch the tape or spin the record backwards or flip the MP3, but it sounds like just English backwards. Don't listen to what he's saying. Listen to...
Его сняли с гонки, но он рекомендовал всем своим сторонникам поддержать госпожу Харрис.
See, that's just English backwards. That's all it is. Wouldn't that be a trip if that's what it was this whole time? Russian's just English backwards? Really? I could have talked to Ivan Drago from Rocky IV this whole time. Didn't know that. So, yeah, anyone surprised? Vladimir Putin's choice for president would be number one, the guy who's in there right now, Joe Biden, not Donald Trump. His second choice, Kamala Harris, not Donald Trump. Who were you told for the last 8 years? Which one was the puppet of the Russians? Which one was colluding with Vladimir Putin to steal Hillary's emails and to fraudulently win the election and then to do the Hunter Biden laptop garbage? I mean, that wasn't even a believable story to begin with. But isn't that the damnedest thing? The people who were telling you they're communists, the communists agree with them. Just like when they talk about how Donald Trump, he's the choice for white supremacists and racists and everybody out there who hates people of color. That's sure is Team Red. And you go to the biggest guy, the guy who put together the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, the biggest neo-Nazi in America today, Richard Spencer. Who does he endorse for president? Oh, that's right, Kamala Harris. Joe Biden was his first choice, but definitely not Donald Trump. It's the weirdest thing. Can you believe that? It's almost as if we're not really Nazis over here on Team Red. It's the damnedest thing. Every walker who joins the American Heart Association's Heart Walk, every dollar donated means more people trained in life-saving CPR, more research, more life-saving moments for everyone. Walk to save lives. Register for the Dallas Heart Walk at dallasheartwalk.org. Or if you don't want to drive all the way over here, you can go to tarrantcountyheartwalk.org. Thank you very much for hanging out with the James Show today. You can catch more James Show action on the podcast, WBAP.com, WBAP app, wherever you're already listening to podcasts. Find my stuff on social media. Find me on Facebook or Twitter, wherever you're already at. Like, share, subscribe. It all counts. I'm James Parker. This has been the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.